Hello and welcome to the video. This is my overview and first look at this latest camera from RunCam. This is the new RunCam6. I guess you could kind of say it's the very latest version of the very popular RunCam2. Now there's been quite a few versions of that original RunCam2 getting more and more sophisticated, eventually resulting in a 4K version. And I've got them all here, right from the original RunCam through the different RunCam2s to the excellent RunCam3s that I really liked, but GoPro saw their backside about those. Then the nice RunCam5. Form factor wasn't great for the hobby for that, going right the way up to the 4K RunCam2. And then we have the new contender, which is the new RunCam6. And as you can see, there are some significant improvements over the older RunCam2 4K. Specifically, we now have a OLED. We have an awful lot more ventilation at the sides. It's a USB-C connector at the back. And there is also removable lens covers, like there are on the front of things like the RunCam Thumb Pro and some of their other new cameras as well, which means that you can fit ND filters. Now this camera has been out for a while, so you may have seen other reviews about it. However, there has just been a version of the firmware release, version 1.4.3, and that has added a number of additional benefits. So I've been waiting for that firmware before I made a video. Specifically, the things that have changed in that latest firmware are improved support for gyro flow, because surprise, surprise, this is a modern action camera. It has a gyro inside and records data that can be used with gyro flow to stabilize your footage. There is also a fix in the new firmware so that you can output NTSC video format. Yep, that's a little HDMI thing there at the back. But actually, if you use this USB-C cable here, there is this cable that's provided as part of the kit. Be aware some of the early cables that were shipped were incorrectly wired. The new version, which has this red cover, is wired correctly. And not only can you have control of the camera from a flight controller, as you can do with an awful lot of the RunCam stuff, it'll also allow you to power the camera without the battery installed. I have confirmed that with RunCam, but also it'll output analog video. So you have a HDMI output here, and you also have the ability for that too. They've also added a photo mode via that UART control. That's new with 1.4.3 of the firmware. And I've updated mine and tested it using that latest and greatest version. So what are the headlines on this? Well, it's a 12 megapixel sensor. That's nice because I think you need about 8 megapixels to capture 4K properly. So hopefully this can do that well. It has EIS, so electronic image stabilization inside. So you can turn that on with certain modes and that will stabilize the footage internally. Seems to work a lot better than their other cameras from the playing I've done here. I'll show you a side by side with the 4K RunCam2 in a moment. OLED on this one, so you don't need to use the app in order to change things. You can actually read on the screen exactly what's going on. It's a little bit of an eye test, but it's doable. It does also have pre-record, allows you to retain the last 15 seconds of the material. That's only in 1080p at 60 frames a second. Also has the detachable lens cover at the front, as already shown. ND filters are available for them, and they do look like they're the same ones that are used on things like the RunCam Thumb Pro. So if you already have a set, you could share them between the different cameras. Replaceable battery inside. Charging power can be done from 5 volts to 20 volts using the USB-C port at the back. You do get a little charging cable. Real-time output of CVBS or analog video is available and now supports NTSC with the latest version. And it has that HDMI port, both of which are available for you to plug things into even when the battery cover is snapped close. Weight of this thing isn't bad. It's only about 49 grams. 12 grams of that is the battery, so you can take the battery out and power it. As I said, I did check that with RunCam because that's one of the things that we all wanted to do back in the day. So let me show you how this comes in the box. It's a reasonable sized box in here. Image sensor in this is actually a Sony IMX377, that's a 12 megapixel sensor. Video file format is going to be an MP4, interface is USB-C. Video resolutions, as you'll see in a minute, from 4K, only 30 frames per second maximum, sadly, and it only goes down to 1080p, although I don't imagine lots of us are recording in 720 these days. The manual that you get with this thing is actually really good. RunCam are really nice with their manuals, and it also shows you how you can wire the camera up to be controlled by a flight controller, as well as do all the settings with the app, but also with the camera itself. Maximum SD card supported on this is a 512 gigabyte Samsung card, although U3 is recommended. It's got a buzzer in here, it's got a microphone in here, so it does record audio. Power USB at the back is, again, it's 5 to 20 volts. Battery capacity is an 850 milliamp hour battery. It is replaceable. I really like that because that means that you can have spares with you. You can charge them and have them in your back pocket. So if you want, you can swap them over if you're using it in an application where you can't provide it with a power supply while you're using it. Field of view is adjustable, as we'll see in a minute. Large, which is what I'm going to use to record the demos in the video, is 155 degrees. Middle is 142, and small is 130 degrees. Shutter is variable from 1/30th of a second to 1/240th of a second, and it pulls about 500 milliamps from that battery when it's working, and it will give you, they reckon, about 60 minutes at 4K and about 135 minutes at 1080p 30 frames a second. Now, this is the cable in the box that you get. This is also the mount. I do like the fact that these guys do ship these things, so you could put it, if there is a mount and you have room for this kind of setup, you can actually put it at the front of your quad. The challenge is that these cameras are not brilliant for that. However, this style of GoPro mount is available in lots of different places. And I think one of the benefits of a camera like this, where it has its own battery supply, it isn't just for the hobby. You can actually go out and use it anywhere on the handlebars of your bike or your helmet or whatever it is to record other stuff too. You don't have to have a power supply like the RunCam Thumb Pro in order for everything to work. Dimensions on this are 66.5 by 40 by 20 millimeters, which is pretty much the same size as the previous version. Again, the cable that came with mine is the incorrect one. You need to get the right one. From what I can see, it has to be the one that has the red heat shrink on for it to be wired correctly. In terms of how you update the camera, that's really easy and straightforward. You just copy the update file onto the root directory of the SD card, power the camera. When it comes up, it will find the firmware file and just update. You don't have to touch it. It'll just sit there with the lights flashing, and after a couple of minutes it'll shut down and delete the file, and it's all done. Control of the camera is really easy too. There are two options. You obviously have the ability to use the buttons. So by long pressing the power button, that'll turn it on and off. A press of the Wi-Fi button will turn Wi-Fi on and off. But a long press of the Wi-Fi button will get you into the photo mode. Another long press will get you then into the settings mode, and you can navigate that menu. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's something that you can do at the field if you don't want to fire up the phone and connect to it. However, it's when you connect to the phone that things start to get really cool. Just like all the other cameras that they've had for a very long time, you can start your RunCam app and then you can connect to it over the Wi-Fi with the Wi-Fi turned on. It reminds you of what the Wi-Fi network should be called and also what the password is too. So you just click connect to the camera and you're in. Once you click connect, you'll see it say connected on the camera, and then you're in. At the top are all the different settings, so you have the exposure, things like the ISO sensitivity. I'm leaving all these at defaults. The shutter speed, you've also got the saturation, contrast, sharpness. These are all the defaults actually. I haven't changed a lot of these. This is how it's come in the settings. Brightness, we've also got things like the white balance, so you can change that. Again, I'm leaving it on automatic just so you can see what it looks like. You can flip the screen up or down depending on how you have to mount this thing. There's also the field of view. These are the three field of views that I talked about in the introduction. Medium, narrow and wide. We'll keep it on wide for the test. And lastly, we have the metering mode, whether it's kind of weighted, center weighted or spot. I would just have the average. That tends to work the best. Going into the individual modes, you can see here we have 4K, only 30 frames a second, sadly, bit of a shame that. 2.7K, we have 30 and 60, we have 14:4, and then we also have 1080p. At the moment, I'm allowed to choose all of the different frame rates. It's allowing me to pick whichever ones that I want. If we go into the settings and I try and turn electronic image stabilization on, the internal one, it doesn't let me. And that's because I've set it at an inappropriate resolution, i.e. it only seems to run on the lower speeds. So if I drop this to 30 frames a second and go back in, I can turn on electronic image stabilization, and we can turn on the date stamp, we can dictate how it works, whether or not the stuff is set. Power supply frequency, we have that for different things, and we now have NTC output with the latest version of the firmware if you want to look at the analog stuff out the back. Now, in terms of the latency for that AV output, it's, from the playing I've done here, anything between 60 to 70 milliseconds. It is not super quick. The issue with that is that if you're trying to use it for FPV, I don't think that's really going to work. Maybe as a second auxiliary camera pointing down that you want to switch to with a camera switcher in your setup, that might be a way to do it. But with that lag for the video out, it's probably not going to be usable as an FPV camera unless you have a pretty slow model. Gyro flow can be used with all the resolutions, but make sure the EIS is turned off. It has to be in order to have the gyro flow data to fix it in post, and it can be run without the battery and powered by the USB only. And that will reduce the weight if you have a spare 5 to 20 volt power supply that you want to run out the back. So let's have a look at some of the footage. I thought I would test first of all the side-by-side with the RunCam2 just to see how the electronic image stabilization worked. So here the RunCam2 is on the left hand side. They're both set for the same settings here. It's just standard 1080p, and the RunCam6 with electronic image stabilization is here on the right hand side, and they're kind of locked together. I tape them together so any vibration that appears on one will appear in the other. Now the RunCam2 has no EIS turned on, but you can see here that on the RunCam6 we are getting a slightly smoother experience. The EIS in this is doing a nice job of smoothing everything out and getting rid of some of that jerky movement, and I think there are times that I would fly this where I'd be happy to just use the internal EIS rather than gyro flow. Unfortunately, you have to decide before you fly which one you can do, because the camera, if you have EIS turned on, doesn't save the gyro flow data alongside. But hopefully here you can see how nice the image looks. Again, these are the defaults as it is in the firmware. On a gloomy day like this, I might have boosted the contrast a little bit, but there's nice detail in the shadows, probably slightly overexposed if anything, and I think the colours are more realistic as well. The RunCams have always had a tendency to warm up the image, and this seems to be pretty accurate to how it appeared to the naked eye. Next test I did then was I did some side-by-side with a standard 1080p setting and also a 4K at the maximum 30 frames per second rate. These are the views side-by-side. I didn't move the camera and started and stopped it, but you can see here when I'm zoomed in into the branches on the big tree that's in the kind of center left of frame, you can see there is an improvement. Now, is it as good as some high-end 4K cameras and some of the GoPro stuff? No, I don't think it is, but there's definitely a better performance of this in 4K mode than some of the cameras I've played with that claim 4K but are just upscaling 2.7K and trying to pretend it's 4K. So in terms of the things I like, well, I like that the 4K footage looks okay. Would I use the 4K footage on a regular flying day? No, I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be quite happy with the 2.7. That's going to allow me to use gyro flow afterwards, or just use the onboard electronic image stabilization to smooth the footage out when I'm flying around. I do like the fact that it now has onboard stabilization, and the performance of that isn't bad at all. I'll also like the option we have gyro flow support. I wish we could have EIS for the live capture and then still have the ability in post to mess around, but you have to kind of choose one or the other. I guess that's just down to CPU horsepower. And I do like the fact that we have the ND filter options too, and they seem to be compatible with the other cameras in the lineup that use them. Removable battery is nice, I do like that, and the fact that it can be charged via the USB-C port from your flight controller or a 5-volt BEC inside your model, and that's nice because it does mean that you have that option if you do want to keep the weight down. There are also the options to control this via a UART or a PWM signal to start and stop things. That's nice, so it means that you can actually control it remotely if you want to. I don't tend to use those features. I tend just to hit the record button before I start to fly and then hit the record button again to stop it when I land. But it's good that you can change things, and they're thinking about the integration with the hobby. One of the things that I love about RunCam. I like the fact we can now access the settings via the screen and change things at the field without pulling the phone out and navigating through all the menus, but it works in exactly the same way as all the cameras have for a long time, in that once you're in the app, you can pretty much change whatever you want. HDMI output is very nice. I'm sure there'll be lots of people who'll be excited about that who have HDMI rigs on their larger models. And we also have the option of the AV video out of the back now with the latest firmware in both NTSC as well as PAL. From the playing that I've done here, a couple of things to be aware of. That little OLED is an eye test, so if you need glasses to read, guess what? You're going to have to pop them on in order to play around with the camera settings if you're not using your phone at the field. And only 30 that 4K mode. The 4K mode is good. It's not modern GoPro 4K, but it's very usable for the stuff that we do in large parts of the hobby. I would have liked a 60 frame per second mode just to capture some of the fast movement in a slightly crisper detail. EIS is not available on the higher frame rates. I guess that's again CPU horsepower inside, so be aware of that. You're going to have to sacrifice frame rate if you want EIS turned on. And EIS cannot be used at the same time as gyroflow. The lens is on the end, so watch your mounting options. It might not fit on things like a quad. However, I think this is more a camera that you can use for the hobby, but actually then take it off, put it on the front of your motorcycle or your helmet or your handlebars or your skis or lots of other places where you would like an action camera that potentially could be put in a little bit of danger, and you don't want to destroy a 300, 400, 500 pound GoPro if it happens to take a hit. So as you've probably gained from the commentary so far, I do like the RunCam6. I do think this is a worthy upgrade to that RunCam2 4K with those extra features and additions. For those wanting to use a camera in more places on RC models, then personally I think this is another decent option alongside both the original RunCam2 4K but also the fantastic little RunCam Thumb Pro, which has the benefit of not having a battery in it, and that is super lightweight and you can install them pretty much anywhere. This feels like a very modern camera from RunCam with the kind of touches that are on here, and I am surprised that it's taken RunCam this long to put some of them on their cameras. Things like having an OLED, along with the Wi-Fi, the ND filters, updated EIS and gyroflow support, but they're all on here so you don't have to worry about missing out. Personally, I would have liked a 4K 60 frames per second mode and maybe just a little bit more crispness on that 4K recording. But for less than £100, this is a really nice way to get 2.7 and 4K footage, even if it might not be at the highest frame rates. Thank you for watching my video. Check out the playlist, and adding Pedantry 60 to your search terms will help you find my content. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. You can support the time I spend here answering questions and helping others by using the links in the video description.